The point of this course is not to critique popular American culture. It is not to pick at it or look down upon it. And it is not to watch videos for credit.
The point is to treat popular culture for what it is, and for what it always has been, the main purveyor of the spirit of the time. A TV show that becomes important to many people, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, does so because it expresses something of that spirit. In the first part, we saw how the show rewrote the rules of TV drama, and manifested many cultural shifts happening in the transformative phase of the late 90s. Now, let's carry on into the new millennium, and see what else it can teach us about that time. After those first 3 glorious seasons, the show now had to change its nature. What was a high school show now had to accompany its heroes into adult life. As a result, the Buffyverse expanded. While previously we were mostly in Sunnydale High, dealing with the demons circulating in and around the school, now the battle was to be taken to other places, and the themes became broader. Could it still retain the magic? Let's find out. The first expansion was that the show now had a spin-off. Angel left for LA to have his own TV show, taking Cordelia and Wesley with him. The first season of Angel ran simultaneously with the 4th season of Buffy, allowing for many crossovers that added a lot of excitement to both shows, and set Angel off on a good foot. But the creators of Buffy were left with the task of filling the void, having to deal not only with the loss of Angel and Cordelia, but also with the departure of Oz, who leaves mid-season because Seth Green wanted to focus on his movie career. Big shoes to fill, but there were solutions. Backed by popular demand is Spike, who is more than enough to cover for the loss of Angel. And Cordelia's place is successfully filled by Anya, who drags Xander into a sexual relationship. The ex-demon's attempts to learn how to be human, and her complete lack of tact, lead to many amusing fish-out-of-water moments, as well as somber reflections on what humanity is. And Emma Caulfield is charming and funny in the role. The show doesn't expand too far, though. Buffy and Willow go to college, but it is a local college, UC Sunnydale. Still, the wider world is brought into it. At the end of the first episode, we learn that there are mysterious uniformed men sneaking around the campus, hunting demons. We gradually learn that they are part of a military unit called the Initiative, which is capturing demons and handing them over to scientists in lab coats, who then perform experiments on them. The US government is intruding on Buffy's world, and the clash is inevitable. But it takes time until they cross paths. The first half of the season is mainly about Buffy trying to make it in college. This, of course, provides a new challenge for the creators. Successful college movies were usually frat movies, a guy thing, and would accentuate things like rebelliousness, partying, and scoring with chicks. Buffy the Vampire Slayer shows us how it feels from the girl's perspective. In the beginning of the season, Buffy gets seduced by a boy, who comes over as sweet and sensitive at first, but brushes her off after they have sex. She then spends several episodes wondering what is wrong with her, not realizing that this is just how college boys are. Buffy does, however, meet a genuinely nice boy. Riley Finn from Iowa, who is an assistant to Professor Walsh, her favorite professor. The two eventually hook up, and Buffy thinks that she has a normal boyfriend for a change, and finally gets to experience a full relationship. In the first 3 seasons we saw Buffy, Willow, and Xander have sex only once, losing their virginity. Now, as young adults, they start to have regular sexual relations. Buffy with Riley, Xander with Anya, Willow, at first, with Oz. But this is college, time for experimentation, and the creators decided to experiment with Willow. Experimenting means that you discover hidden parts of yourself. In previous seasons we saw our heroes growing up and becoming individuals. But this process of maturing is determined in large part by society, and represses parts of you that are eccentric. Once you've developed your individuality, it is time to challenge it and discover those other parts. This includes your sexuality. Human sexuality is diverse and rich, and everyone has to find out what their own proclivities are. We see a metaphor for that with Oz, who gets overtaken by lust when he meets a female werewolf, and cheats on Willow. Oz realizes that he can't control the animal inside him, and decides to leave town and go search for a way to master the werewolf. By the time he returns, however, Willow has already been taken by something that was hidden inside her. She makes a friend named Tara, who is also a witch, and the two start to perform magic together, without telling the rest of the gang. At first, the creators wanted this to be a metaphor for a closeted lesbian relationship, but eventually they decided to go all the way, drop the metaphors, and make Willow gay. It is hard to comprehend today how ballsy this move was. Homosexuality was still an anathema to conservative America, and right-wing politics were dominated by a group that called itself the moral majority, which identified morality with Christian values and considered gay rights to be a harbinger of doom. Moreover, homophobia was still prevalent in liberal culture as well. The rock and roll period, with its focus on giving a voice to minorities, did give gays a voice to fight for their rights, but the rock and roll mind was dominated by jock machoism, so gays were a threat to its image of what men should be. In the transitional phase to the cyber period, however, things were changing. On the show, this transition is personified in the character Larry, Buffy's high school classmate. Larry is an athlete, and at first he is introduced as a chauvinist jock bully, who picks on Xander for not being manly enough. But this was something that back then we were beginning to realize, that those who are blatantly homophobic are often being so because they are battling with their own repressed homosexuality. In Season 2, Larry realizes that he's gay, but he is sure that if people will find out about it, it will be the end of his athletic career and will destroy his standing as a popular student. By the end of Season 3, however, Larry is out of the closet, and he realizes that people generally accept him. A cultural shift was taking place, and the creators decided that it is time to dare and go further than a gay side character. Willow and Tara embark on a lesbian relationship, to the chagrin of the WB executives. But, like Larry, these executives found out that they needn't worry, because the world was ready for it. One of the things that made the world ready was the lesbian chic of the late 90s, which saw women, mostly straight hot women, making out on screen, to the pleasure of the audience, mainly the male viewers. As Season 4 began, you could still go to movie theaters and watch Cruel Intentions, in which our Buffy shared a naughty high school lesbian kiss with Selma Blair, which was a big sensation at the time. The creative team wanted to avoid being part of this trend, and to take the portrayal of lesbians a step further. While we get quite a lot of eroticism in the depiction of the heterosexual relationships, especially between Buffy and Riley and between Spike and his new main squeeze Harmony, there is no eroticism in the way that the Willow-Tara relationship is depicted. It focuses on the emotional side, humanizing the lesbian couple rather than using it for titillation. It wasn't just the characters that were experimenting, though. The creators started to experiment as well, and write episodes that played around with TV conventions. The three most celebrated episodes of this season are Hush, in which monsters steal the townsfolk's voice, resulting in 25 minutes of silent film that are both hilarious and terrifying. Restless, a wonderfully surreal dream sequence that lasts almost the entire episode, in which the heroes share a dream together. And Superstar, in which we are thrown into a completely different reality, and gradually figure out that someone performed a magic spell to alter the reality that we know. The latter prepares us for what was to come in the next season, and this experimental attitude will carry on throughout the show, usually to great effect. That is what was so great about the 90s. Yes, the TV shows weren't as tightly produced as they are today, but exactly because of that, they had room to experiment and grow. There was a feeling that there are no rules, that we are discovering new ways to do television. Today's TV dramas are works of art, and don't have the flaws that plagued 90s shows, but none of them has that fresh excitement. Hush, the episode where everyone loses their ability to speak, presents one of the themes of the season, learning to live without one of your previous faculties. In several episodes, we see one or more of the characters losing an ability that they usually had, and compelled to make do without it. And this ties to a bigger theme, men losing their power. All the male characters, in this season, are going through a hard time. Giles, no longer a watcher, and realizing that Buffy doesn't need his guidance anymore, goes through a midlife crisis, feeling redundant. Xander, who was not accepted to any college, is living in his parents' basement, and struggles to find a steady job. Oz undergoes a crisis when he realizes he can't control the werewolf inside, and leaves town. And Spike, who comes back to town to kill the Slayer, is seized by the Initiative, and implanted with a brain chip that makes him feel paralyzing pain whenever he tries to attack someone. He manages to escape, but without the ability to kill, he loses his self-worth and becomes suicidal. This is a depressing view on women's lib. Instead of both genders empowering each other, we see that as the women grow stronger, the men become weaker. One of the biggest failures of feminism, in my view, is that it failed to suggest ways in which liberated women can use their power to make the men in their life stronger and happier. The Scoobies have a lot of infighting in this season, mostly because of the men's frustration with their growing irrelevancy. One man who seems to be doing okay at first is Riley, Buffy's new love interest. Riley is a tall, hunky guy, a nice and decent boy from Middle America, with great physique and a good heart. He seems like a refreshing change for Buffy, someone who can give her a normal, steady relationship after the craziness she experienced with Angel. But then she discovers that Riley, and Professor Walsh, have a secret identity. Walsh is the head of the Initiative, and Riley is one of the top commanders working under her. When they learn of each other's true identity, they try to combine forces at first, and Buffy is recruited by the Initiative. But the Slayer, unlike the soldiers, doesn't just obey orders. She asks questions and gets closer to the truth of what the Initiative is really about, a truth that is hidden from Riley and the other agents. Walsh realizes that she is a threat and tries to eliminate her, but ends up alienating Riley, who starts to question his mission. The Initiative story is the main arc of this season, and as this is a science fiction and horror show, the plot is quite predictable. Walsh is working to create super soldiers, and part of it is enhancing the capabilities of her soldiers with a combination of drugs and technology that is implanted in their body. Meanwhile, she secretly works on a super soldier made of human parts, demon parts and high-tech weaponry, called Adam. But the moment Adam comes to life, he immediately murders her and escapes, and for a while the story is an obvious homage to one of the classics of sci-fi horror, namely Frankenstein. Adam, however, is a highly advanced Frankenstein's monster, and he soon develops his own ideas. His plan is to carry on Professor Walsh's mission of creating a breed of super soldiers, but then use this army to take over the world. He becomes the big bad of the season, and he is a good villain, but the overall story just doesn't carry the emotional punch that the previous two seasons had. We never got emotionally involved with Adam, so we are not moved as we were when Buffy had to fight Angel of Faith. This is the main reason why Season 4 is considered to be relatively weak. Politically, however, this is a very interesting season. First, as we are now in college, our heroes are beginning to develop political consciousness, which gets mixed in their daily battle against evil. The show deals with themes such as identity, bigotry, and white guilt, and does it in a way that is critical of political correctness and highlights the complications of the issues. As we have come to learn on the show, dilemmas surrounding good and evil aren't black and white, and this is how the political questions are treated as well. The Sunnydale High School sat on top of the Hellmouth, which represented the evil lurking under the surface of humanity, contained in the irrational side of human nature. The Sunnydale College, on the other hand, sits on top of the Initiative base, which represents the rationality that governs our society. We learn that there is evil in this rationality as well, that the system that humankind created is not all good. After getting her teeth cut in fighting the local authorities in Season 3, Buffy now goes national, and fights against the US government. Riley, at first, is torn between the two worlds, but when the evil of the Initiative is fully revealed, he goes rogue and joins the Scooby Gang. When he does, he naturally has an identity crisis, which is compounded when it turns out that the Initiative pumped him with drugs and modified him technologically. He has to overcome all that to become an independent freedom fighter. In that he resembles Spike, who also needs to overcome what the Initiative did to him, and manages to regain his self-esteem and swagger when he realizes that he is still able to do violence against demons. So he, too, joins the Scoobies. You can choose to see the story of Riley and Spike as a metaphor for men needing to re-establish their place in a world of independent women. In the coming seasons, both will need Buffy's help to succeed, but Buffy will pretty much fail to accommodate, echoing the failure of feminism. So much for the politics of the season, but it is very interesting from a philosophical perspective as well, as it revolves around the battle between reason and magic.
I always knew you could do better than a B-. And now I understand your energies were directed to the same place as ours, in fact. It's only our methods that differ. We use the latest in scientific technology and state-of-the-art weaponry. And you, if I understand correctly, poke them with a sharp stick.
Oh, it's more effective than it sounds.
The worldview that is based on reason believes that humankind has the ability to use its reason to figure out the laws of nature, and thus control nature and devise a better world for itself. This worldview is responsible for the creation of science and technology, with which humankind has conquered more and more of nature. The worldview based on magic, on the other hand, believes that nature is one big unity, and humankind is part of it. So its attempts to control nature are actually disconnecting us from that unity, and we become alienated and miserable as a result. When you remain part of the unity, you have the ability to converse with nature, and if you do it right and don't upset the natural balance, nature will correspond with you and do what you ask it to do. This is how magic works. In the modern world, we no longer believe in magic, but the idea that we are part of nature, and that reason, science, and technology are alienating us to nature and harming our ability to feel harmony and happiness in our existence, is still an idea that has merit. So when modern storytellers use magic in their stories, it is usually to remind us that we are part of nature. When it is done right, art can make us experience that unity that humankind lost when we became masters of the world. Season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is all about regaining that unity. This is connected to the theme of overcoming the loss of an ability, and in this case, our heroes overcome it with love. Love is another theme that is widely discussed in this season, and it focuses on the irrationality of it. Love, it is hinted, is a form of magic, something that connects us beyond reason, and we can't explain why. This connection helps our heroes overcome their temporary disabilities. It also helps them overcome that other theme we've discussed, the internal strife within the gang. The challenge for the Scoobies is to find the magical chemistry that they once had, and reunite against Adam. The reason versus magic battle also has a gender aspect to it, as reason has often been associated with men. Willow started the show as a science nerd, but she gradually drifts towards the feminine side, towards magic. She joins the Wicca group in college, but finds out that they are just silly middle-class liberals who appropriate the Wiccan religion as some sort of feminist statement. But she does meet Tara there, and when these two witches get together, they form a feminine duo with powers to be reckoned with, giving us an alternative to the scientific way. We learn that there is something in us that is beyond reason, something that connects us in ways that we can't explain. When Season 4 started its run, it was just 3 months before the end of the millennium, and the world was reminded of the dangers of science, with the doom prophecies related to the Y2K bug. You'd expect a show like Buffy to deal with it, and the main arc is indeed about preventing an apocalypse kick-started by science. But actually, the moment that ended up being the most prophetic came early on, in an episode titled Fear Itself, where the dreaded monster of the week turns out to be an itty-bitty and easily stompable demon. The Y2K bug was real, and did cause some problems, but the scare around it was created by technophobes who did not understand how computers work, and thus made it into a much bigger deal than it was. The world survived the passage into the new millennium, and in the episode that came right after that, Buffy and Riley symbolically saved the world from an apocalypse. So technology isn't as evil as it is sometimes depicted in romantic prose. It becomes evil when it comes at the expense of humanity. The initiative represents a kind of thought that is pure reason, disregarding the irrational and magical. While the Scoobies represent a humanity that unites organically, improvises, explores itself, rebels and loves, the initiative's logic is purely hierarchical, following a given set of rules. Professor Walsh is supposed to be a psychologist, a scientist who explores the human psyche, but she scoffs at matters of the heart and doesn't understand them. The scientists under her command think that they have a top-down view on nature, and that it can be reduced to terms of cause and effect. They are not interested in understanding the motivations and emotions of demons, just how they work biologically, so that they can control them. And the soldiers under her command just follow orders. This lack of self-exploration into their own human nature makes them unaware of the darkness that dwells in it, so they can't see the evil of what the initiative is doing, until it manifests itself in the form of Adam and destroys them. Adam, the big bad, inherits this cold logic. This makes him a formidable villain who can break nature into its elements and put it back together at will, creating powerful weapons. But his inability to understand that other side of humanity turns out to be his Achilles heel. Like our heroes, he too tries to understand his own identity, and he does it by trying to figure out what humanity is. But since he can only do so by trying to reduce it to its different parts, he doesn't understand the whole that holds it together. While magic is about life growing organically as one big unity, Adam is about creating life artificially, by joining dead parts that don't naturally belong together. His hybrids are very powerful, but nature, as an organic whole, is more powerful still. Our heroes realize that none of them is strong enough to defeat Adam, but when they get together to discuss it, the brainstorming produces an idea. In the final battle, Buffy, Willow, Xander, and Giles use magic to combine into one super being, representing an organic unity against Adam's abominable mixture. Adam uses all his faculties to fight this super being, but he is unable to locate the thing that gives it its power, since its power is drawn from nature as a whole and resides everywhere. Adam's anatomy, on the other hand, is based on hierarchical logic and laws of cause and effect, so our heroes figure out how to defeat him.
How can you
Never hope to grasp the source of our power. But yours is right here.
Surprisingly, this happens not in the final episode of the season, but in the penultimate episode. The last episode is the dream sequence. Once again, the creators manage to subvert expectations and mess our sense of time. It's a neat trick, but it is nothing compared to the wicked trick that they pull at the beginning of the next season. In the beginning of Season 5, we see Buffy having to deal with one of the side effects of being a superhero, namely, fame and notoriety. After defeating evil so many times, Buffy is now a legendary slayer, dreaded and respected by the underworld. The first 4 episodes all feature some demon that comes directly for her, on a mission to get the invincible slayer. And, unbeknown to her, this fame is also responsible for an important addition to her life. This duality is something that all the other young characters deal with as well. In the 3rd episode, Xander falls victim to witchcraft that makes him split into 2 Xanders. One is immature side that is full of insecurities, the other is adult and confident side. The latter must learn to take over, while not completely erasing the former. As they make the transition into adulthood, our other heroes face the same challenge. Willow becomes a very powerful witch, which makes her an asset and a leader, but she struggles not to lose her humanity in the process. Anya has to overcome her demon mindset and accept her humanity and mortality. Tara starts the season falsely believing that she is part demon, and tries to overcome this part. And Spike's humane side now takes over, as he realizes that he is in love with Buffy, so he tries to overcome the monster that he was, to be worthy of her love. And then there's another character. At the end of the 1st episode, Buffy enters her room, and we get our first surprise. This will be repeated several times during the season, as we will see Buffy walking into her home to find something unexpected inside, because this season revolves around her home and family. This first time actually doesn't seem like much of a shock for her, but for us...
What are you doing here?
Buffy, if you're going out, why don't you take your sister?
Mom!
Suddenly, out of nowhere, Buffy has a 14-year-old sister, and everyone acts like she has always been there. It is as if we are thrown into an alternate reality. This trick of suddenly introducing a new member of the family was typical of soap operas, and is one of the reasons why soaps, and TV in general, were not taken seriously. But we know that this show does take itself seriously, so the appearance of Little Dawn means that some major league sorcery mischief must be going on. While in previous seasons the opening episodes were mainly offering exposition, Here we are thrown into deep waters right from the start. Dawn Summers, Buffy's little sister, is a divisive figure among Buffy fans. She is an annoying brat, but I have no problem with that. This is what little sisters are. Michelle Trachtenberg is actually 14, and her acting skills are understandably lacking, but she gets better over time. Looking at it today, I saw something else. The relationship between the two sisters, despite them being only 5 years apart, is actually a great real-time reflection of a generational divide. Because while Buffy and her friends are very typical Generation X kids, Dawn is, in every way, a millennial. It is quite amazing to look back today and see how on the money the show was in this regard. While Buffy is going out and putting her life on the line every night, she, and her mother, feel like they need to shelter Dawn from the world. Baby boomers like Joyce were those who determined that teenagers should go out and conquer the world. Never mind the cost. Gen Xers like Buffy tried to live up to this ethos, but lost a lot of the ideological drive behind it, and also realized that the world out there is full of ghouls. And so they became overprotective, keeping millennials mollycoddled at home. Dawn wants to go out and be adventurous, but Joyce and Buffy won't let her.
Okay, I will patrol with the group tonight.
When do I get to patrol? Not until you're never.
Instead, Dawn lives in Fantasyland, using it as reference. If the late 90s were when fantasy started to become cool with books like Harry Potter and shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the early years of the new millennium were when it took over. Director Peter Jackson made full and glorious use of the recent developments in CGI technology, and brought Tolkien's Lord of the Rings to the big screen, opening the door for other directors to follow into the land of fantasy. For millennials, fantasy is not just a nerd thing anymore, but universally accepted, to the chagrin of the Gen Xers, who still regard it as uncool.
No, but see, Mom, that doesn't really work for me. We're just going to the magic shop. No school supplies there.
Yeah, Mom, I'm not going to Hogwarts. Huh. Jeez, crack a book sometime.
Frown all you want, Buffy. You took us there. The plot thickens when Buffy is attacked by a very powerful being, shaped like a beautiful woman named Glory, who easily whoops her ass. She escapes along with the monk, who tells her that Glory wants to open a portal, and it will cause many people to die. The duty of his order was to protect the mystical key to the portal from her, but she eventually hunted them down. They knew that the only one who could protect the key now was the legendary Slayer, so they worked a magic spell that turned it into a little girl, and altered everyone's memories to remember her as Buffy's little sister. Buffy is angry about this raping of her mind, but she realizes that her emotional bond with Dawn is too strong, and she cannot think of her as anything else but family. She must protect her from Glory. And this is the main theme of this season. Family. Family, we are shown, is something that is beyond blood ties. Yes, those are important as well, but more important is the emotional bond that is formed between people, which turns them into a family. While in previous seasons we always saw the Scoobies bickering and fighting, in this season they bond together. It gives the 5th season a very warm feeling, which helps in making it one of the best. Every Buffy season can be seen as a play with 3 acts. The first act ends around episode 7, and the second around episode 14. In the first act of this season, we see the family coming together. Buffy learns who Dawn is, and accepts her as a sister. Giles, back in Watcher capacity, also becomes the owner of the magic shop, which becomes the gang's new hangout. Xander finally finds his calling, and becomes a capable construction man, helping the team with his craftsmanship. Anya finds work in the magic shop, starts to enjoy being human, and helps the group with her knowledge of the demon world. Tara, after getting away from her authoritarian and bigoted biological family, is accepted by the Scoobies as a member of theirs, and forms a Wicked Witch duo with Willow. And Spike, once he realizes his feelings for Buffy, tries to ingratiate himself with her by actually helping the gang. But there is one problem that threatens to eventually destroy this unity, and it is one that we've encountered in the previous season. As the women grow ever more powerful, the same can't be said for the men. The creators are aware of it, as we can see in the way Buffy treats her boyfriend. Buffy has become so powerful and confident that she is totally self-dependent, and she makes Riley feel redundant. Riley is a man who believes in equality and self-growth for both genders, and could have been perfect for Buffy. But Buffy fails to make him feel her equal, fails to let him feel like their relationship is based on codependence. Riley also feels lack of passion on Buffy's part. Buffy, apparently, needs a man who is a challenge, a wild beast that she can tame, and a wholesome guy like Riley doesn't excite her. This is a trope that we find in many romance novels, and its popularity suggests that there is something in women's psychology that corresponds to it. The fact that the Buffy fandom didn't like Riley is probably partly due to that. He is too boring for your average female viewer. This makes it kind of impossible for him to win, and after a failed attempt to become what Buffy wants, he skips on a plane and goes back to the army, leaving her heartbroken yet again. So the creators did see the problem, but failed to provide a solution. The men of the show don't get empowered. Most of them are beta males, and they develop only their nerdy qualities. Their growth is basically in learning how to play second fiddle to women. The alpha males, Angel, Spike, Oz, don't get their power from their humanity, but from the beast inside. Their growth is learning how to tame this beast, not in expanding their human abilities. The show fails to provide a picture of gender equality, instead tilting the scales towards women. Riley's departure is just one of the emotional turmoils that Buffy goes through this season, in which the melodrama reaches heights not seen since the heart-rendering second season. After the first act brought everyone together, the second act sees fractures forming in Buffy's family, especially her biological family. Dawn discovers her own duality, realizes that her human posterior is just a cover, and has a major identity crisis. More seriously, Joyce is diagnosed with brain tumor, and there's fear for her life. But after a successful operation, she seems to be healing. Meanwhile, we learn more about Glory. Played by Claire Kramer, she is a fun iteration of the evil queen trope, a narcissistic bitch from hell, Cordelia to the power of million. Like every big bad, she stands for the opposite of everything that Buffy learns in this season. While Buffy learns to open up and love others, Glory is self-centered and vain. While Buffy learns to let everyone feel like they are individuals who have something to give to the family, Glory keeps minions who do nothing but worship and grovel at her feet. And while Buffy surrounds herself with people who employ their minds and talents, Glory sucks people's brains out to preserve her power. This turns out to be her weakness. She is unable to maintain her power in this dimension, and unless she feeds on brains, she loses power and turns into a human male named Ben. Ben is presented as Glory's brother, but he is a nice guy who disagrees with her psychotic ways. To compensate, he works as a nurse and tries to help people. So while Buffy's family comes together, this is a family that is dramatically conflicted and torn apart. The fact that they share the same entity, however, is ultimately to Ben's detriment, and he goes through an arc that is the opposite of our heroes. While they all manage to have their better sides take over, Ben devolves the more the season progresses. As the fateful hour when Glory can open the portal approaches, she promises him eternal life if he cooperates with her, and he gives in. Buffy, on the other hand, is becoming a woman. Her teen rebellion years are over, and she now needs to establish a relationship with other grown-ups. She fails with Riley, but learns from her mistakes, and realizes that she must let others into her life. Even though she is no longer under Giles' authority, she asks him to be a watcher again. Then, she even brings the council back into the fold, but only after they agree to do it on her terms. For the first and last time in the show, the council actually does something useful, and provides crucial information about Glory.
Just tell me what kind of demon I'm fighting.
Well, that's the thing, you see. Glory isn't a demon.
What is she?
She's a god.
Glory is a vengeful goddess who was banished from a hell dimension by the other gods, because she became too wicked even for them. Ben was created as a prison to contain her, but it wasn't strong enough, which is why she can break out sometimes. She intends to use Dawn to open the portal between the dimensions and return to her world. The problem is, this will allow many demons to come into our dimension, resulting in carnage. The only way to close the portal then would be to kill Dawn, so Buffy must find a way to stop Glory before this happens. Meanwhile, Buffy's quest to understand herself leads to some troubling insights. She asks Spike, the Slayer killer, what makes Slayers vulnerable, and he tells her that every Slayer has a death wish, that she is drawn to that death that she fights against. Fearing that she is losing her humanity, Buffy then consults the first Slayer, and asks her if she is capable of love. The first Slayer assures her that she is full of love, and love will lead her to her gift, which is death. This confuses Buffy, who doesn't understand how love and death go together, but it is part of one of the main themes of the season, the true nature of love. This theme is explored in many ways, and the message seems to be this: love is a relationship between equals who respect each other's individuality, but it isn't true love unless they are also willing to sacrifice themselves for the other. Buffy was willing to sacrifice herself for Angel, but not for Riley, and this is why she failed. And when Spike almost lets Glory kill him to protect Dawn, Buffy realizes that he does love her, and starts to treat him more tenderly. She eventually figures out that death and love go together because death is the ultimate self-sacrifice. In the third act of the season, all of these threads come together to create masterful television. Buffy is overwhelmed by tragedy after tragedy, and she has to learn how to cope as her world crumbles around her. It starts with her coming home to find...
Hey, flower getting lady. Want me to pick Dawn up from school? Mom? What are you doing? Mom? Mom? Mommy?
The shocking death of Joyce, one of the anchors of the show, gives the creators the opportunity to dramatize the loss of a loved one, resulting in a shattering episode that has rarely been surpassed in terms of raw emotions. It also gives them the ability to explore adulthood from a woman's perspective. With her father now completely out of the picture, Buffy is left to stand on her own. Until now she was the teenage girl. Now, at the age of 20, she has to be a mother to a teenage girl. Glory now becomes a metaphor for the government, threatening to take Dawn away unless Buffy proves she can parent her. Buffy drops out of college, and her entire existence now revolves around Dawn. Luckily, she has her Scooby family to support her. Glory, meanwhile, continues to sow terror. She attacks Tara and sucks her brain out. Willow, overcome with grief, turns to black magic, which makes her a lot more powerful. I don't think I mentioned how fantastic Alison Hannigan is in the role. Willow is a character that keeps adding more and more layers with every season, and Hannigan takes you on the journey with her, managing to maintain her charm and quirkiness as she becomes mightier and mightier. She is now even more powerful than Buffy, but she is still no match for the goddess. Glory keeps coming, and eventually she figures out that Dawn is the key. The gang tries to escape, but to no avail. Glory seizes Dawn, and uses her to open the portal. The Scoobies now have no choice but to go to war, and they have to put their minds together to figure out how to defeat the big bad. While in the Season 4 climax they did it by merging into one being, here they do it as a family, as a group of individuals who work together, each bringing their own merits. Only in this way are they strong enough to win, and they manage to kill Glory as well as bring Tara back to sanity. But it is too late. The portal has already been opened, and demons start pouring through it. Buffy now has to sacrifice Dawn to save the world, like she did with Angel. But then, she reckons that there is another option, since Dawn was made from her DNA, and she finally realizes what her gift is.
I give my love to my friends. You have to take care of them now. You have to take care of each other. You have to be strong. Dawn, the hardest thing in this world is to live in it. Be brave. Live. For me.
Dying young was an ideal of the modern age, romanticized by the romantics and then finding its way into pop records and horror movies, portraying teenagers living their live fast, die young ethos. But during the rock and roll period, starting in the 70s, the mentality gradually shifted. Living an exciting life in your youth was still the ideal, but now pop records also talked about surviving those years and making the transition into adulthood. Buffy's death, coming right at the end of the rock and roll period, is one of the last manifestations of the die young ideal. And she dies while telling Dawn that the ideal should actually be living. Buffy's sister is the dawn of a new era. Before the internet, you had a few short years to go out and conquer the world. If you failed to achieve fame and glory, and didn't get yourself killed, you were then doomed to the routine of work and family, and living in your small world. But the internet is a space that you can explore and conquer at any age, and this changed our psychology. For the millennials of the cyber period, it is not about going out to the real world and living any adventure it can offer. It's about going online into the many fantasy worlds pop culture now has to offer. When they have near-death experiences, it is usually in a video game, and when they die, they just respawn. Buffy is still part of the rock and roll period, in that she lives an adventurous life and dies young. But then, in Season 6, the rules of the new period assert themselves over her. She is not allowed to die young. She gets resurrected. The world she returns to, however, is a very different world. On the same week that Season 6 began, the US invaded Afghanistan, and this happened because 3 weeks earlier, jihadi terrorists flew airplanes into the World Trade Center, and the feeling that we had throughout the 90s, the feeling that the world has achieved peace, was shattered all at once. The show returned to a much darker world, and those who were hoping it will provide escape were soon to be disillusioned. Buffy was not about escapism. It was about reflecting the world as it is. And in a world that suddenly awoke to the evil of jihadi terrorism, in an America that was seeking revenge while being paranoid about the possibility of other attacks, the show once again perfectly captured the mood. Aiding in this change was the fact that it switched networks, from WB to UPN, and was allowed to explore more mature themes. The creators took advantage of this freedom, and made the show darker, though not necessarily better. And so began the most divisive of all Buffy seasons. Some people love Season 6, many others hate it, but I think we can all agree that the first act is good. It starts with Buffy 6 feet under, and Willow and Tara moving into her house to act as parents for Dawn. Spike, guilt-ridden over failing to save Buffy, is now fully committed to help them. The Scoobies carry on with the slaying, and are doing alright, but Willow is unwilling to accept this situation. She is convinced that Buffy is in a hell dimension, and wants to use magic to pull her out. She confides with Tara, Anya and Xander, and they all have trepidations about messing with the primeval forces of nature, but Willow, now a powerful and domineering woman, forces her will. She uses the darkest magic, including the slaughter of an animal, to perform the ritual, and brings Buffy back from the dead. The Scoobies rejoice, but Spike has something to say.
It's the thing about magic. There's always consequences. Always!
And to the show's credit, Spike's foreboding does materialize, to an extent I never expected. From here to the very last episode, everything will be about dealing with the consequences. The effect on Willow is immediate, and we see her getting drunk on her power, becoming addicted to magic. It gets to the point where she uses it on Tara, violating her to shape her into the girlfriend that she wants. When Tara finds out about it, she moves out. The main theme of this season is having to deal with the hardships of adulthood, and basically failing. In addition to Willow and Tara's broken relationship, Xander and Anya have their own problems. Xander proposed to Anya at the end of Season 5, but now he has doubts that he is ready for marriage. Anya has her own fears, but they hide it from each other. Buffy, meanwhile, was borderline suicidal ever since her mother died, finding it almost impossible to cope with the demands of adulthood on her own. Fighting Glory actually helped her keep her mind off it, but now, with no big bad on the horizon, she is left with the suffocating routine of running a household, taking care of Dawn, finding and keeping a job, and doing her Slayer duties, and she can't handle it. She feels no joy in her life, and basically loses touch with her humanity. The only one she can relate to is Spike, who understands the darkness in her heart. She increasingly relies on Giles to take care of things, while allowing Spike to introduce her to the demon world, here a metaphor for the sleazy side of urban life. All of this sounds like regular TV drama stuff, the stuff soaps are made of. But there's a deeper layer.
Wherever I was happy. At peace. And I was warm. And I was loved. And I was finished. Complete. I don't understand theology or dimensions, any of it really. But I think I was in heaven.
And this is where, philosophically, the show takes a turn for the worse. This is a very different message from what we saw in previous seasons, especially in Season 3, when the show was at its best. The message has always been that there is no heaven, there is no perfect world, and there will always be evil around you. So why are we fighting? Because there is a lot in our world that is good and worth preserving. In episode 9 of Season 3, we are thrown into an alternative reality, a nightmare in which the vampires took over Sunnydale, and they are using humans for mass production of blood. It isn't just a scathing criticism of capitalism and the way in which we treat animals, it also reminds us that the world could be much worse if we didn't fight against evil.
But we never.
Never win.
Not completely.
Never will. That's not why we fight. We do it because there's things worth fighting for. Those kids, their parents.
This angel quote comes from episode 11, in which we see the dangers of trying to fix the world for good. The mothers of Sunnydale want to eradicate evil from the city, and it ends with a literal witch hunt in which they almost burn their own daughters. This is the liberal stance. There is no perfect world, but we can make it as good as it can be. The show always maintained a great balance between criticizing liberal society on the one hand and showing its good sides on the other. Liberal society aspires to allow everyone to pursue their own happiness, realizing that the path to happiness is different for every individual. But now, as the beginning of Season 6 introduces the possibility of heaven, we are reverting to an older idea. Instead of believing that you should be always fighting, always renewing, finding your happiness in the process, we get the idea that you can be complete, that there is a state that you should aspire to. In other words, that there is only one happiness, one path that we should all walk in. And this idea opens the door to anti-liberal thinking, heralding a turn for the worse in liberal thought, a turn which, for feminism, will prove to be a total disaster.
I think I was in heaven. And now I'm not. I was torn out of there. Pulled out by my friends. Everything here is hard and bright and violent. Everything I feel, everything I touch, this is hell.
Somewhat alleviating the dark mood are Warren, Jonathan, and Andrew, three whiz-kid nerds who were Buffy's high school mates. Now, inspired by comic books, they think it would be fun to become arch-villains.
We're like supervillains.
Using their mastery of technology and magic, they perform a series of crimes in Sunnydale. But their real mission is...
We're your arch nemesis. Sees. You might have beaten us this time, Slayer, but next time... next time... Maybe not!
And so they mess up Buffy's life, adding to her misery. But in the first act, they are quite harmless and funny. The first act culminates in episode 7, the celebrated Once More with Feeling, in which Sunnydale gets a visit from a demon who makes everyone sing and dance, and reveal their secrets. It's a dark yet splendid 48-minute musical, which reminds us how joyous the show can be.
What a lot of fun. You guys have been real swell. and there's not a one who can say this ended well. All those secrets you've been concealing, say you're happy now, once more with feeling. Now I gotta run, see you home.
But then, in the second act, all the joy is sapped out, leaving nothing but depression, desperation, and anguish. There aren't any philosophical issues for me to discuss here. It's just the daily grind of survival. Giles decides to leave and return to England to allow Buffy to take control over her life. A totally dick move, since Buffy obviously still needs help to get back to her feet before she can start walking. She is financially broke, living under the threat of the social services taking Dawn away, and the college rejects her reapplication request, leaving her with no future to aspire to. She finds work in a burger joint, and is mired in the tedious rut of a boring day job, which makes her world feel even more hellish. Of all the horrors we've witnessed through the show, this, the depiction of drowning in a meaningless existence, is somehow the scariest. She was already feeling dead inside, but she was at least hoping to snap out of it. Now she gives up. Sinking into self-loathing, she starts a sordid affair with Spike to degrade herself, and neglects her duties for the sake of rough sex. Ashamed, she keeps it a secret from everyone, which adds to her loneliness. Xander and Anya are going through their own hell. They are busy planning their wedding, and it turns them into nervous wrecks. But what's worse, they are dreading the future, especially Xander, who is afraid he will end up like his loser parents. The thing that Buffy goes through in the present, the excruciating routine of a boring job, is what Xander fears his marriage would be like. Again, we are witnessing the process many people go through as they enter adulthood, giving up on their childhood dreams and realizing that they have to settle for an ordinary existence. But all of this pales in comparison to what is going on with Willow. She is the hero of this season, a tragic hero in every sense of the word. It was her hubris that set things in motion to ruin everyone's life, and she pays for it. She is now addicted to magic, and she loses Tara, who refuses to continue in their relationship until Willow kicks her habit. But Willow denies that she has a problem, and only goes deeper and deeper, falling into a bad crowd. Buffy and Xander are too wrapped up in their own affairs to notice it, and she becomes a total magic junkie. While the Scoobies are busy with these problems, they all neglect Dawn. Already upset that they won't let her be part of the team, even though she's at the age that they were when they started fighting demons, now she becomes resentful and angry. Her angst left unchecked, she becomes a kleptomaniac. The nerd trio, which at first seemed like a comic relief, only makes things a lot more depressing. While Jonathan and Andrew are just in it for the kicks, Warren is a true psycho, and he drags them along with him. We are beginning to witness the dark side of nerd culture, and nerd boys in particular. In the first seasons, Buffy fought against the sexism of the jock types, who disrespected women and regarded them mainly as targets of sexual conquest. But the jocks, being successful with the ladies, did not hate women. The nerd trio has very little contact with real-life women, and it makes them not just sexist, but downright misogynist. Once again, the show proves to be an early depiction of the new cultural terrain, of the problems found in a society run by nerds. When the trio actually kills a woman, they cross the line and become true villains. It is starting to look like they are the big bad of this season, which is such a downer after the glorious big bads of the past. The only one thriving in these rough waters is Spike. He cannot physically harm humans, but he settles for a life of crime, re-establishing his stature in the demon world. And he exploits Buffy's vulnerability, taking her on a ride which satisfies her sexually, but makes her hate herself even more. The only ray of sunlight is Tara, who, this entire time, maintains her humanity and charm. Amber Benson is lovelier than ever, and reminds us of how our heroes used to be, keeping the hope alive that they will return to their former selves. And there are some positive developments. Willow, after hitting rock bottom, finally admits that she has a problem, and quits magic cold turkey. Buffy, after going through the gutter of self-degradation, rediscovers her will to live, and starts to climb back. She finds the strength to break off with Spike, and improves her relations with Dawn. Towards the end of the second act, Willow and Buffy regain their mental balance, and things begin to look brighter. But then, everything gets a whole lot worse. Xander and Anya's big day finally arrives. With all their fears and trepidations, they were also very happy about the prospect of tying the knot, and it served, for both the Scoobies and the viewers, as the only optimistic arc in the dark times, the only thing to look forward to. As expected, the reception is hilarious, as his dysfunctional and narrow-minded family meet her demon friends. It's a bit of the old Buffy, a sense that we can finally relax and enjoy ourselves, especially since Willow and Tara are making eyes at each other again. Buffy experiences a moment of happiness, but then, Anya's past of harming men finally comes back to haunt her. Someone she once cursed gets Xander freaked about the future, and all his fears come to the surface, leading him to leave her at the altar. Xander and Anya, who were part of the team that brought Buffy back from the dead, now experience some of the consequences that Spike warned them about. But the question is, what did we do to deserve this? In the middle of the third act, it feels like the creators are doing everything in their power to emotionally torture us, defiling everything we loved about the show. It feels like there is just no end to this nightmare. And then, it gets much, much worse. Our heroes are still bravely trying to fight back and turn their life around. Willow and Tara are back together, Buffy and Dawn are better, and Buffy finally manages to find the nerd trio and get Jonathan and Andrew arrested. But Spike, unable to deal with Buffy dumping him, goes downhill. He spills the beans about their affair, and then he tries to rape her. He ends up leaving town, and vowing,
Get nice and comfy, Slayer. I'll be back. And when I do, things are gonna change.
And while Buffy is still reeling from that,
You think you could just do that to me? You think I'd let you get away with that? Think again.
Your shirt. Tara?
this is the ultimate price that Willow pays for playing around with the forces of nature, trying to cheat death. Death comes back to collect its debt. And the victim is Tara, the only one who could keep her in check. With her gone, everything goes to hell, and Willow's grief drives her overboard. Yet again, we are witnessing the dark side of nerd culture. Throughout the show, Willow was always battling her self-image as an unpopular nerd, and her power trip was her compensation. Now, it overtakes her. An extremely powerful witch, the raging Willow is unstoppable. She absorbs the darkest magic, and wreaks her vengeance. It is possibly also a metaphor for post-9/11 America. Willow tortures and kills Warren, and this feels justified and satisfying, just like torturing and killing Al-Qaeda terrorists satisfied America's need for revenge. But then she vows to kill the other two nerds, and we realize that she has crossed the line. Afghanistan was justified, but what will going after other countries do to her soul? We watch with horror as Willow, the most beloved character on the show, turns into a psychotic killer, and it starts to sink in that she is the big bad of this season. But actually, the big bad isn't Willow. It is loss of humanity. This is the thing that Buffy managed to defeat, as she slowly dug her way out of the spiritual grave that she was in. But others weren't so successful. Tara was the symbol of humanity in this season, and therefore had to be killed. Anya, betrayed by Xander, forgoes her humanity and becomes a vengeance demon again. Spike finds a demon who promises to make him what he once was, and it looks like he's going back to his evil ways. And Willow is consumed by dark magic. After finding her own humanity, Buffy must now help her friends find theirs. All of this is happening in the last 4 episodes, and there's one thing to say for them. After the depressing sludge we've experienced since the beginning of Act 2, this part is riveting, and you watch with bated breath as the events unfold. The Scoobies, including Demon Anya, all come together to protect Jonathan and Andrew, and prevent Willow from passing the point of no return. It comes to an epic fight between Buffy and Willow, and climaxes as Giles returns, looking like a total badass, and puts Willow in a binding spell. Giles was sent from England by a coven, which sensed Dark Willow's rise and endowed him with the magical powers to stop her. There is a short respite, allowing us to catch our breath, allowing Buffy to finally have a good laugh, And then, things become so much worse. Willow breaks away from the bind, and saps the magical forces out of Giles. This was actually part of his plan. His forces came from true magic, the kind that is connected to everything in nature, and he was hoping that this empathy will rekindle her humanity. Instead, Willow feels the pain of every living creature, and decides that the only way to end it all is to end the world. This is the other theme that our heroes had to fight against in this season. Extreme pain, pain that is so great that it drives you to suicide. Buffy managed to climb out of this grave, but now Willow puts her literally back in a grave, along with Dawn, so she won't stand in her way. This time, it seems like nothing can prevent the apocalypse. Except Xander. Xander did not give up on his humanity, and now he steps up to talk to his childhood friend Willow, hiding somewhere inside this dark monster of doom. And, because she was implanted with empathy, he manages to get to her, and she finds her way back to the surface. Giles' plan worked after all. After an entire season that felt like a slow bleeding out of humanity, humanity comes roaring back in the last few moments, bringing hope to the post-9/11 world. There is something that connects this season to the 9/11 terrorists. When you believe in heaven so much, like this season's Buffy and like the terrorists, it makes you lose your humanity, because you can't find anything to love about this world. And when your life sucks, you might just want to end it all, like Willow. And in a world where weapons of mass destruction exist, this makes Armageddon an actual possibility. It is a scary world, but we have to bravely face it and deal with it. Hiding from the dangers is not going to make them go away. This is what Buffy finally realizes.
I got it so wrong. I don't want to protect you from the world. I want to show it to you. There's so much that I want to show you.
I love this line. This is why I do what I do, why I put so much work into these videos. I want to show you the world of the spirit with all its beauties. With this realization, Buffy finally climbs out of the grave and finds new meaning to her life. Season 6 ends on an optimistic note. Oh, but wait, there is someone we forgot.
You have endured the required trials.
Bloody right I have.
So you give me what I want. Make me what I was. So Buffy can get what she deserves.
Very well. We will return your soul.
We were fooled into thinking that Spike wants to remove his chip so he can go back to being evil. But actually, what he wanted was to prove his love for Buffy by getting back his soul. Spike embodies the victory of humanity, providing a powerful exclamation point to the end of the season. And it takes us to the next season. The first act of Season 7 is all about healing and rebuilding. It begins with a gang cut down to Buffy, Xander, and Dawn, but Buffy learned her lesson and understands that she must share her powers and let other people into her world. In the first episode, we see her teaching Dawn to slay, and from here on she will take everyone back in, one by one. This proves to be crucial later, as this is the final season, the big showdown, and she will need all the help that she can get. First there is Spike. He is back in Sunnydale, and Buffy is wary, but accepts his new and soul form. But Spike is haunted by something. At first he thinks that it is just the consequences of getting his soul back, and that the ghosts of the people he killed are back to haunt him. But slowly we realize that there is something else out there, as Buffy is haunted as well, by dreams of girls being murdered all over the world by robed assassins. Then there's Willow, who has gone with Giles to England to heal and reconnect with pure magic. She comes back to Sunnydale and is welcomed by her friends, but she realizes that she is still not in full control of her powers, so she is afraid of using them. Anya, meanwhile, is busy being a vengeance demon, but her heart isn't into it. After experiencing humanity, she can't go back to being fully evil. She is torn between the two worlds, and eventually chooses to become human again. By the end of the first act, Buffy convinces both her and Spike to come back into the fold. The gang is back together, the fun and humor return, and it feels like old times again, which is great after the depressing 6th season. The Sunnydale High School reopens, rebuilt on the Hellmouth, and Dawn attends it. Buffy checks it out, and finds that the new principal is a sexy and mysterious young man named Robin Wood. Wood, unlike the two previous principals, is neither too liberal nor too conservative, and applies a healthy mixture of discipline and compassion in his attitude towards the students. He suspiciously seems to be taking a particular interest in Buffy, and offers her a job as counselor. Buffy accepts, and finally has a meaningful job. We now get to see high schoolers through the eyes of an adult, trying to help them with their problems. In her high school years, Buffy defeated all the demons that she had to deal with, but now that she tries to help others do the same, she learns that it isn't always possible. In the beginning of the second act, the big bad reveals itself. At first it appears as apparitions of dead people, who have the personality and memories of the people who died, so they seem like genuine ghosts and manage to manipulate the living. It manipulates Jonathan and Andrew, who fled to Mexico at the end of Season 6, to come back to Sunnydale, and then it gets Andrew to murder Jonathan, in a failed attempt to open the Hellmouth. Worse, it has control over Spike, and gets him to kill people. Both Andrew and Spike are remorseful, and Buffy, despite the objections of the Scoobies, decides to keep both of them in her house, to help them get redemption and also to learn what she is up against. And thus she manages to figure out who the enemy is. It is the first evil, known simply as the First. We already met it for one episode in Season 3, and we know that it is the evil that is in everyone's heart, and therefore can never be eliminated. The First can appear as apparitions of dead people, but it has no corporeal body. Therefore it needs soldiers, and those that we are already familiar with are robed assassins called the Bringers. Not long after Buffy figures it out, Giles appears on her doorstep accompanied by 3 teenage girls, and fills in some of the blanks. The First, he informs, is sending the Bringers to kill the potential Slayers and their watchers. We later learn that because the mystical forces around the Slayer changed when she was resurrected, the First feels that it can eliminate the Slayer, and then take over the world. So it starts by killing the potentials, to ensure that there will be no new Slayer once it kills Buffy and Faith. The full extent of the damage caused by Willow's hubris is finally revealed. With the entire Slayer line in danger, the Council finally has a chance to make a difference, and it rises to the challenge by immediately getting wiped out by agents of the First, proving its utter uselessness once and for all. Buffy is left as the only one capable of defending the remaining potentials and preventing the apocalypse, and the second act does a good job at establishing just how hopeless the situation is. Not only is Spike rendered useless and even dangerous, but Willow is as well. When she tries to do magic, it gets manipulated by the First, and she realizes that she cannot take the risk. On top of that, the First manages to open the Hellmouth, and out comes another one of its weapons. A breed of feral vampires, purer and stronger than regular vampires. Buffy is pretty much the only effective fighter left for the side of good, and the odds are badly against her. She deals with it by deciding to build an army. As Giles brings in more potentials from all over the world, she trains them to be fighters. Despite the protests of her friends, she keeps Spike and Andrew in the house, because they both expressed a desire to fight for good. She gets yet another recruit when Principal Wood confesses that he is the son of a former Slayer, and the vigilante demon fighter himself, who came to help her in this last battle. And she figures out a way to kill the Ubervamp, and even the odds a little. All of this is quite exciting and enjoyable, but there are other aspects to the second act, which drag it down. The biggest problem is the Slayer potentials, who are revealed as a bunch of whiny millennials. They are not the do-it-yourself teenagers of Buffy's generation, but self-entitled girls who blame the world for their problems. We are beginning to see the takeover of a new mentality, which is not about girl empowerment but about girl victimhood. For a show that made feminism one of its flags, this change will prove to be devastating. Andrew, meanwhile, represents another malady, one that typifies the postmodern age. He is unable to live in reality, but constantly weaves everything into narratives designed to shift responsibility and blame away from himself. It is quite funny and entertaining on the show, but proved to be destructive for liberal society. Willow is doing somewhat better, as she hooks up with one of the potentials. Sadly for all geeks, it is not Felicia Day, but a girl called Kennedy. Kennedy is actually different from the other potentials, a lot more feisty and adventurous, but she manifests another problem which typifies contemporary feminist stories. She is a Mary Sue, a prelude to the boring female heroes we get in action movies nowadays. In short, the potentials are no fun, and as their number swells, they only take away more valuable time. The other problem is Buffy herself, as her new role of commanding an army does her no good. This is when Americans were living in constant fear of more large-scale terrorist attacks, when they were in the mindset of going to war to defeat international terrorism, when they were looking for someone to lead them, and when President George W. Bush was trying to rise up to the role. Buffy, similarly, has to show leadership, and she proves that she can take tough decisions, but in the process she also develops megalomania, which is probably meant to mirror the behavior of President Bush at the time. She starts to believe that she knows best, and expects everyone to fall in line. Too much time is spent on her giving inspirational speeches to her soldiers, and it doesn't make for good television. Because of all this, the 7th season is largely considered to be one of the weakest. We await the 3rd act, which will save us from this dreariness. But when it comes, it mostly feels like more of the same. The first is becoming stronger, emanating evil through the Hellmouth, and all the people of Sunnydale are fleeing town, which means that the plot now revolves around the Summers residence, where Buffy is still making speeches to bratty girls. At one point, everyone gets fed up with her and kicks her out of her own house, and only Spike takes her side. It doesn't feel believable, and it's not good television. Put together, the 2nd and 3rd acts feel like a long slog towards the final battle. This is how it felt on first viewing, but now, looking back, I can see that there was actually a significant transformation between the 2nd and 3rd acts, because in the 3rd act, the liberal philosophy of the show is completely discarded, and a different philosophy, which has been undermining it for a while, reveals its face. And its face is pretty ugly. The 3rd act begins with Buffy, using a Slayer kit that belonged to Wood's mother, arranging a mystical meeting with the original council, which created the first Slayer thousands of years ago. They reveal that they used demon essence to create the Slayer line, and they also tell her that she isn't strong enough to deal with the first, and want to make her stronger by putting even more demon into her. Buffy refuses to give up her humanity, fights them and defeats them. She realizes that these men are cowards. They didn't want to do it to themselves, so they burdened women with the job of being a Slayer. But they were afraid to give women too much power, so they decreed that only one girl at a time can be a Slayer, and that she would be subordinate to a council of men. And so, they created the power structure which the Slayers had to obey. This is a different kind of feminism, which I call creationist feminism. Liberal feminism believes that we live in a liberal society that is dedicated to achieve equality, and works within this system to eliminate the remaining prejudices and boundaries that prevent gender equality. Creationist feminism, on the other hand, believes that we live in a patriarchy, a power structure that was created by men thousands of years ago, designed to ensure the dominance of men over women. This feminism believes that gender equality is impossible to achieve, until we destroy this underlying structure. When Buffy the Vampire Slayer began, it was all about liberal feminism. Buffy was fighting against remnants of sexism and misogyny, but also to protect a society which allows her to do so. In one of the episodes of Season 3, we already meet the first, and our heroes accept that they can't defeat it, since evil is part of reality, but they can fight back and keep it at bay. In Season 7, creationist feminism takes over the DNA of the show, and now we start talking about defeating the first. The allegories are pretty obvious. The first evil is misogyny, which drives men to want to hurt women. The original council represents the creation of the patriarchy, the structure that rules us. Yes, it gives women some power and partially protects them from misogyny, but also designed to ensure that men will remain in control. The current council represents the liberal order, which is more enlightened in its treatment of women, but structurally is still a patriarchy, and its seemingly benevolent facade actually prevents us from realizing the problem. But now that it has been demolished, it leaves the Slayer against the real enemy, against the first evil, against misogyny. If she can defeat it, true gender equality will prevail. Creationist feminism believes that everything we are is a construct of the patriarchy. Therefore, if we follow our individual interests, desires, and wills, we are actually only helping to maintain the patriarchy. So it is pointless for girls to try to be better. They are victims who can never achieve their potential, until the revolution comes and the patriarchy is brought down. Thus, the Slayer potentials are not going through any arcs, any growth. They just sit around and wait for Buffy to defeat the first, defeat the patriarchy, so that they can start living. It is sad to watch a show that was all about girl empowerment go down this path. To remind you, when the show began, it had the opposite message. Unlike previous superheroes, Buffy didn't want a heroic life. Peter Parker had a choice to become Spider-Man, and he chooses to do so despite all the sacrifices that he has to make. Action is his reward. But for Buffy, just having a normal life of dating, shopping, and cheerleading always seemed a lot better than being a superhero. She always dreamt about being able to leave the Slayer business and be normal again, until season 6, when she was inflicted with the bug of a heavenly existence, and regular human life lost its taste. It is the same bug that inflicts creationist feminism, and makes it disavow the good life in liberal society, and seek utopia instead. In the second act, Buffy's megalomania seems to be a natural development out of the stress of suddenly finding herself a leader of an army. In the third act, we get a creationist feminist explanation for it. She is a megalomaniac because the patriarchy made her so, infused her with demon essence. It made her individualistic, which is a male thing. She needs to connect to her female essence, which is about solidarity and sharing, if she is to defeat the first. Meanwhile, we are introduced to the first's right hand. He is a priest named Caleb, who has extreme religious views and believes all girls are dirty whores controlled by the devil. He already murdered a few women before he was contacted by the first, and became its disciple. He is human, but he draws dark power from the first, and this makes him very powerful, too powerful even for Buffy. He was the one who blew up the council, and again, this is symbolic. The council was the facade, while Caleb is the pure face of the patriarchy, authoritarian, cruel and misogynistic, while pretending to be a holy man of the cloth. According to creationist feminism, the patriarchy twists all men into various degrees of that. Towards the end, the creationist feminist fantasy is revealed in all its tawdry glory, and it is revealed Deus Ex Machina. When it seems that all hope is lost, Buffy meets a centuries-old witch, who assures her that women were never the suckers that the patriarchy thought them to be. She is part of a women's order who are guardians to the Slayers, but they had to hide from the council. Now, they are the last surprise in the fight against the first. Centuries ago they forged a weapon, a scythe, which Buffy now owns. If she uses it wisely, she can win. In other words, while the men thought that they had women playing by their rules, it was actually the women who were making the rules, waiting for the right moment to strike and bring down the patriarchy. This is delusional nonsense, which breaks away from the rule that the show set for itself to be an allegory to reality, and it is responsible for most of the bad elements found in the last season, especially in the third act. Which is a shame, because the other stuff is quite good. For one thing, the theme of gathering everyone for the final battle continues. Angel drops in at one point to provide some valuable help, but even more exciting is the return of Faith, who comes to complete the redemption arc that she was undergoing on Angel's show. Other characters, like Willow, Anya, and Andrew, also complete their redemption arcs. Most significantly, Spike finally manages to break the hold of the first, establishes himself as a good man and valuable fighter, and wins Buffy's love. In the beginning of the third act, we learn the first's master plan. It wants to become corporeal, and this can happen only if evil rules the world. So it is gathering an army of ubervamps under the Hellmouth, preparing to overrun humanity. In the meantime, it distracts the Scoobies by playing on their fears and animosities, and sowing contention and demoralization within their ranks, and Buffy has to rely on everything that she had learned over the years to keep her army together. Then there is Caleb, who is charismatic, powerful, and terrifying. He kills a few potentials and pokes Xander's eye out, before Buffy finally uses the scythe to slay him. The superb Nathan Fillion gives an electrifying performance as Caleb, and ensures that the last few episodes, at least, would be thrilling to watch. The grand finale is also good. Buffy, to this point, knew that she had no chance to stop the First and his army of Ubervamps, but then she comes up with a plan. And once again, just like the good old Buffy, her plan involves changing the rules of the game. The scythe gives her access into the structural rules set by the the Council, which means that Willow can hack it with her mojo, and set new rules.
In every generation, one Slayer is born, because a bunch of men who died thousands of years ago made up that rule. They were powerful men. This woman is more powerful than all of them combined. So I say we change the rule. I say my power should be our power. Tomorrow, Willow will use the essence of this scythe to change our destiny. From now on, every girl in the world who might be a Slayer will be a Slayer. Every girl who could have the power will have the power. Can stand up, will stand up. Slayers. Every one of us. Make your choice. Are you ready to be strong?
These guys are dust.
This is how the show ends, with the ultimate creationist feminist fantasy. The patriarchal rules have been torn to shreds by the feminist warriors, and women will no longer be held down. It still takes an act of self-sacrifice from Spike, who completes his redemption arc by activating a device that kills him, destroys the Hellmouth, and turns the town of Sunnydale into a crater. A few more soldiers are lost in the fight, but the revolution is achieved.
We saved the world.
We changed the world. I can feel them, Buffy. All over. Slayers are awakening everywhere.
We'll have to find them.
We will.
Yes, because the mall was actually in Sunnydale, so there's no hope of going there tomorrow.
You destroyed them all? I fought on the wrong side.
The destruction of the mall hints at another thing. The downfall of the patriarchy is also the downfall of the capitalist order, as they are tied together. The show has never been anti-capitalist. In episode 9 of season 3 we get a metaphor for the rapacious nature of pure capitalism, but it is an alternative world, not the society we live in which capitalism is combined with socialism. After that, the show makes fun of capitalism through Anya, the demon-turned-human, who embraces capitalism with all her heart. Her materialist side is a side of her that remained inhumane, and it shows the inhumanity that resides in the logic of pure capitalism. But as much as the show is critical of her capitalism, she is still endearing, and it also makes her the more practical of the Scoobies. But creationist feminism has a Marxist logic, and it cannot suffer even a smidgen of capitalism. In the world after the feminist revolution, people like Anya have no place, and she dies in the final battle. You probably think that I'm stretching it, and I am, a little bit. The final season is still great television, the finale is still very inspiring, and the creationist elements that I mentioned are not overtly felt. But it is hard today, knowing what has happened since then, not to see these elements creeping into what was a liberally minded show. So now, to end this video, let's inquire what has gone wrong since then, and why. Once again, let's go back to the glorious Season 3. In episode 11, titled Gingerbread, we meet a character that we never met before or since, Willow's mother.
Oh, sit down, honey.
Principal Snyder talk to you?
Yes, he's quite concerned.
Mom, I know what this looks like, and I can
You don't have to explain, honey. This isn't exactly a surprise.
Why not?
Oh, well, identification with mythical icons is perfectly typical of your age group. It's a classic adolescent response to the pressures of incipient adulthood. Oh.
Is that what it is?
Of course, I wish you could have identified with something a little less icky, but developmentally speaking.
Mom, I'm not an age group. I'm me. Willow group.
Oh, honey. I understand.
No, you don't. Mom, this may be hard for you to accept, but I can do stuff. Nothing bad or dangerous, but I can do spells.
You think you can, and that's what concerns me. The delusions.
Mom, how would you know what I can do? I mean, the last time we had a conversation over 3 minutes, it was about the patriarchal bias of the Mr. Rogers show.
Well, with King Friday lording it over all the lesser puppets.
Mom, you're not paying attention.
And this is your way of trying to get it. Now, I have consulted with some of my colleagues, and they agree that this is a cry for discipline. You're grounded.
So, her mother is one of those academics who think that they have a top-down view on other humans, to the point where they don't see them as humans, but as puzzles that need to be broken down and then reassembled in the right way. Naturally, she is also a creationist feminist, because this is where creationist feminism comes from. They were always there, but we always knew to treat them as idiotic people who should be mocked, as this scene does. Well, these idiotic people are no longer sidelined, but are infecting the left with their stupidity. Why did this happen? My answer is that it happened because, by the end of the rock and roll period, liberalism has won its battles of that period. As we discussed in part 1, Buffy the Vampire Slayer ended around the time that the rock and roll period came to an end. We also mentioned that in the rock and roll period, the main liberal battles revolved around getting rid of prejudices that stood in the way of people who were not straight white males. And Season 7 basically shows the full victory of this battle. Take the gay thing, for instance. When Willow fell for Tara in Season 4, the network was anxious about it, and it took about a year before we even saw them kiss. At the end of Season 7, she already has a lesbian sex scene with Kennedy. There is also an interracial sex scene, another thing that was rare on the screens before. American mentality has changed, and was now ready to accept gays and blacks as equals, as fellow Americans. When the show started, women in action movies were few and far between. By the time it ended, it was commonplace to see women kicking ass in movies and TV. And it didn't need any magic spell to give them powers they didn't have before. It was a natural evolution. After decades of battling it out with men in the marketplace, women had tougher characters, and it was reflected in the movies. All of the identity battles that pop culture was fighting, then, came to a triumphal conclusion. But exactly because of that, they were no longer interesting. They could no longer provide interesting stories and heroes, and we started looking for different stories, which we haven't exactly found yet. This created a vacuum, and this vacuum was filled by people like Willow's mother. The Sunnydale High School sat on a hellmouth, which represented the irrational size of our psyche. But Western universities today sit on a different kind of hellmouth, which is actually made of an ideology, this anti-liberal ideology that believes that society is a patriarchy. It has evolved since then, and asserts that the patriarchy oppresses not just women, but other groups as well.
I thought vengeance demons only punished men who wronged women.
Oh, that was Anya's little raison d'etre. Most of us try to be a little more well-rounded. And actually, we prefer a justice demon. Okay, FYI.
Yeah, this is how they operate. They twist language to hide the fact that they are driven by hate, and instead portray themselves as working for social justice. And the social justice ideology is destroying the minds of young students, making them develop the mentality of victims. It makes them resentful and pessimistic about the world, as they imagine that it is ruled by an all-invasive force that is working against them, which they cannot defeat. It has become a vampire, sucking the life out of women and out of other groups, and weakening liberal society. Why is it so important to them to change the definitions? Because unlike Marxists, who believe that bringing down the capitalist order would get us to the perfect world, the social justice movement does not believe that it can be achieved by changes in the material world. The oppression begins in our mind, so it is our minds that need to be reshaped, and it begins by reshaping our language. Art, they believe, is also to be used for this purpose, and for this purpose alone. And this belief has taken its toll on the movies and TV shows that we get today. In 2003, the year Buffy ended, movie director Quentin Tarantino released Kill Bill, his own movie about a strong woman fighter. Unlike Buffy, the heroine here has no superpowers, and yet she is a much better fighter than any man. This is unrealistic, but we all understood that it is meant to be unrealistic, and is a commentary on the proliferation of badass women in the cinema of the time. After that, however, showing women as physically stronger, or as equally powerful to men, has become the default in movies and TV. The creationist feminists believe that men are better fighters not because of any biological difference, but because the patriarchy shapes us in this way, and if we get people to think differently, we will erase the physical advantage of men. The result are movies that don't feel realistic, do not show women's actual struggles, and are therefore not empowering to women. We've discussed how the show reflected the final step in women's sexual liberation. The sexual revolution revolted against traditions that regarded sex as sinful and dirty, and made people fearful of their own sexuality. The aim of the revolution was to free us from our inhibitions, and just learn to regard it as a natural and pleasurable act. But, like every revolution, it acquired ideological layers, and started to see itself as the root of all freedom. In the rock and roll period, it was believed that one should start to have sex as soon as possible, the more the better, and try everything out. People took liberties to invade each other's boundaries, believing that they are liberating them. It was indeed fun and liberating for a lot of people, but towards the end of the rock and roll period we also started to discuss the traumas it brought on many others. It was time to end the party, and discuss how to use our liberated sexuality in healthy ways. Faith, the sex symbol of Season 3, gets derided in Season 7 for her sexual abilities, because having only casual sex means that she doesn't know how to experience everything that sex can give you. We seem to be on our way to a healthier attitude, but then, the social justice movement seized upon it, and started to portray the frivolities of the sexual revolution according to its narrative. Since young people today don't understand that mindset of the rock and roll period, don't realize that it was all part of a liberation process, it is easy to convince them that the mistakes that were made are all proof of the evils of the patriarchy. And so, girls are once again brought up to be fearful of sex, and worse, fearful of men. Displays of female sexuality are now being portrayed as a capitulation to the patriarchy, to the male gaze, and are frowned upon in movies. Same goes for style. When Buffy would go out on her patrols, she would often be dressed in a stylish and not very practical way. We understood that we should not judge it realistically, but see it as testimony to how badass Buffy is, that she can slay vampires and still look as stylish as Cordelia while doing so. In the liberally minded feminism of the show, style was celebrated as a woman's thing. Today, style too is being portrayed as bowing to the dictations of the patriarchy, and as something bad. The social justice warriors don't care if it makes the movies look better. Much like female sexuality, female beauty is not something that they even acknowledge. Their view of women is extremely dehumanizing, and they are demanding that movies and TV adhere to it. These are just a few examples of the destructive effect that this vampire of social justice had on Western spirit and Western art. And the really sad thing, within our story, is the effect that it had on Joss Whedon. If we had any doubt that the creationist elements that creeped into the final season reflected the change in Joss himself, we only need to look at what he did since then. The projects he was involved in after that, like the final season of Angel, the TV show Dollhouse, or the Buffy comic books, were dark and pessimistic, conveying a belief that we live in a world ruled by strong powers that render our individual choices meaningless. They were still pretty good, but not suited to his strengths. When I watched and read them, I kept thinking, Joss, this isn't you. Only once did Whedon have the opportunity to go back to do what he does best. In 2012, he was commissioned by Disney to write and direct the first Avengers movie, and was required to produce a light-hearted and triumphant showcase for the Marvel heroes. All of his pessimism was put aside, and the result was a purely fun action film, which was a smash hit and launched the most successful franchise Hollywood has ever seen. It was a reminder of what Whedon could have been, if his mind wasn't corrupted by regressive ideology. It was all downhill from there. When Whedon wrote and directed Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie, he was tasked with making a film that is darker in tone, and his weaknesses were exposed. The biggest failure was the relationship between Black Widow and the Hulk. You'd expect the man that gave us Buffy and Angel to be the perfect choice to write a love story between a strong woman and a man who has a monster inside, but Whedon screwed even the basics. Not once did we see Bruce expressing any feelings towards Natasha. He was just led by her into a love affair, and agreed to it because she said so. This was supposed to be the main emotional axis of the movie, and its failure made the movie emotionally bereft. But this was not why Whedon was viciously attacked on Twitter. The attack came from social justice warriors, because the movie didn't fully comply with creationist feminist formulas. It dared to show women as flawed, not as flawless and brave Amazons held back by a misogynistic system. And Whedon, instead of fighting back and defending his art, basically folded before them. His friendship with Anita Sarkeesian, the poster child of creationist feminism, showed where his mind was at. Today, this regressive, anti-liberal creationist vampire is sucking the blood out of Hollywood female characters. Let's take the Marvel movies as an example. All the movies that focus on a male superhero basically have the same formula. The hero is guilty of hubris, and because of it, his world crumbles around him. He then has to find the power within himself to redefine himself, and reassert himself as a hero. So it is through their humanity that they win, and thus they can inspire us. But Captain Marvel, the female superhero movie, had a different formula. She begins the movie not aware of her powers, because the men who control her mind hide them from her. She doesn't go through any major crisis, and the story is basically about her realizing how powerful and awesome she is. So while the male heroes overcome by discovering the human powers within them, she does it by discovering her superpowers. Since the girl viewers don't have hidden superpowers, it's hard to see how this can inspire them. When you look around, you find this formula in other movies. Rey, the protagonist of the latest Star Wars trilogy, goes through 3 movies without having any interesting arc. It's just about her discovering her powers. Rey and Captain Marvel are typical of today's Hollywood heroines. Asexual, devoid of femininity, possessing a cutesy character without any flaws, fighting no inner demons but only a world that victimizes them, and just flat out boring. When you compare them to the wonderful Buffy heroines, you realize just how damaging creationist feminism has been to the image of women in our society, and how much the portrayal of on-screen women has devolved. In this atmosphere, a reboot of the show can yield nothing good. Which is why it is so good to see that the original show did not lose its power. Buffy still rocks, and is a great masterpiece of the rock and roll period, but it is also still completely relevant to the cyber period, especially due to its celebration of nerd culture. It is this rare mixture of nerd culture with rock and roll that makes it unique, and gives it potency that we can still draw from. Like I said, one of the causes for today's maladies is that the liberal thought of the cyber period did not yet find new causes to fight for, and is yet to create enough good new stories. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a good story of the cyber period, which combines its elements with the true liberal spirit. With stories like these, we can defeat the vampire of wokeism, and every other threat to liberal society. Into every generation a Slayer is born, but it is not she alone who can stand against the forces of evil. As Buffy taught us, a Slayer can have friends and allies. At the moment, the forces of evil seem to have taken over the process that creates Slayers, which means that it is up to the rest of us to defeat them. There will be more awesome Slayers in the future, I am sure, but in the meantime, slay it again, Buffy.